Along with a new head coach, the Atlanta Falcons have their new starting quarterback. And here to help us break down the huge signing for the Atlanta Falcons and new starting quarterback Kirk Cousins is the one, the only Aaron Freeman, who you can find every single Monday through Friday and more, especially on days like this over at Locked On Falcons. Aaron, was the signing of Kirk Cousins the right move for an Atlanta Falcons team that's effectively going to look entirely different, it looks like, going into 2024?
It absolutely was the right move for the Atlanta Falcons, who are, we've been sort of circling the drain these last couple of years at the quarterback position. The last 3 years, you're wondering, hey, is how much more does Matt Ryan have left in the tank? Okay, well, you moved on from him. You traded him to the Colts. Then you're like, okay, well, Marcus Mariota is our bridge quarterback, and maybe we'll develop Desmond Ridder. Mariota lasted less than a year. Then you turn the keys to Desmond Ridder. And you're thinking, okay, this guy has flashed some young potential. And, it didn't quite come to fruition for the Falcons this past year as they try to make a push in the NFC South. And now that leads them down the path to Kirk Cousins, where, he's in a lot of ways similar to Matt Ryan, who was the last quarterback the Falcons had when they made the playoffs 6 years ago. And so I think the Falcons under Raheem, who was on that coaching staff back then when the Falcons last made the playoffs, are looking for that sort of veteran, that stable quarterback that can allow this team to maximize their chances of getting to the postseason, right? They fired Arthur Smith largely due to the fact that he didn't win enough games. And a lot of that is owed to some decisions at the quarterback position and his trust in Mariota and Desmond Ridder. And now Raheem Morris is like, I'm not going to let that be an issue with this team moving forward. We know who our quarterback is going to be for the next 2, 3 or more years, and that's going to be Kirk Cousins. And I think that makes total sense for the Falcons, given their urgency to try to take advantage of so many of the young pieces that they've already assembled under GM Terry Fontenot and will continue to assemble under new head coach Raheem Morris.
Yeah, and as you talk about those big pieces, I mean, Bijan Robinson at running back, Kyle Pitts at tight end, Drake London at wide receiver. There's a lot of talent on this Atlanta Falcons offense. Is Kirk Cousins the guy that's going to be able to help them elevate that talent, showcase it, and potentially win more games than they were able to with Arthur Smith and Desmond Ridder?
Absolutely. That's been a through line of Kirk Cousins throughout his time, especially in Minnesota, where you saw a lot of very talented weapons live up to their potential, whether we're talking about Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, Jordan Addison, Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen. And that's been an issue for the Falcons these last couple of years, in part due to some questionable quarterback play. You haven't been able to get the most out of Drake London. You haven't been able to get the most out of Kyle Pitts, right? And so I think with Kirk Cousins, you're going to be able to really fairly evaluate those players, and hopefully those guys will live up to the potential as 2 former top 10 picks. And then, of course, you have Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, and a very healthy and strong Falcons run game. It didn't quite live up to the potential that we thought it would last year, but I think there's every reason to believe that this run game is going to bounce back and be one of the premier units in the NFL. And so that's going to give Kirk Cousins probably the best run game he's ever had in his entire NFL career. And I looked up the numbers the other night, and basically when he's had like a top 10 rushing attack, he's been very, very efficient in those years. And I think that's really going to help him put his best foot forward as we're getting towards the sort of twilight of his career coming off the Achilles. So I think Kirk Cousins helps the Falcons in terms of getting the max out of their already assembled talent. And I think the already assembled talent for the Falcons is also going to help the Falcons get the max out of Kirk Cousins in these last, couple of years of his NFL career.
Yeah, and you mentioned that Cousins injury, the Achilles injury that ended his season a little early last year, only 8 games. But through those 8 games, he was outstanding, over 2,300 passing yards, 18 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. And with an Achilles injury, you're more likely to come back stronger than you come back weaker. So that's a pretty good sign for the Atlanta Falcons. But when you're starting to deal with some of those injuries and things like that, and you're talking about sort of the getting to the end of Kirk Cousins' career, or let's call it the latter part of Kirk Cousins' career, signing a 4-year deal that's worth $45 million per year probably stands out because of the dollar amount. But when it comes to a 4-year deal, it doesn't feel like this is going to be a situation where you look at it and go, okay, he's the long-term solution at quarterback. So what's the future at quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons in addition to Kirk Cousins?
Well, with signing Kirk Cousins to this deal, you feel pretty good about your quarterback over the next 2 years. It's going to be the questions after that point when those dollars sort of start to continue to creep up, and Kirk Cousins, age also starts to creep up, and we know that Father Time is undefeated in that regard. So
Undefeated.
I think the Falcons are going to have to work at building a potential off ramp to Kirk Cousins if that decline does sort of kick in 2 or 3 years. And that's going to require them to probably take some swings in the draft. Obviously, they did draft Desmond Ridder. I think Desmond Ridder is a solid option as a backup quarterback, but maybe again, this new regime can get more out of him than the previous regime. But I think this new regime is going to want to come in. They have their starter in Kirk Cousins, and they're probably going to want to draft somebody that they can sort of develop over the next couple of years, with the idea that that player may potentially take over for Kirk Cousins starting in 2026 or 2027, should that be the case. And I think they'll absolutely be very interested in taking a quarterback early in this draft class. And even if you take a quarterback this year, doesn't stop them from taking a quarterback next year. And that's basically the gist of quarterbacks. You just keep taking swings until you hit on one. And I think the Falcons will absolutely be doing that over the next couple of years.
Well, they absolutely hit on a free agency signing here, even if it's for the short term. If you want more on Kirk Cousins headed to the Atlanta Falcons and everything going on with those Atlanta Falcons, there's only one place to be. It's Locked on Falcons podcast, hosted by Aaron Freeman. Aaron, thanks so much for coming through, bud.
Absolutely, Ross.